Welcome, best and brightest, to the big three obstacles to mergers and acquisitions. My name's Eric Curtis, and in this video, we're going to talk about the big barriers, the big obstacles that get in the way of mergers and acquisitions. So let's take a look. So the three big obstacles are brand, board, and leadership. So given two organizations are coming together in a merger or an acquisition, there's only going to be one surviving brand, one board, and one leadership team. So let's take a look at those in more detail. First thing, just to set some context, is that nonprofits tend to have a lot of emotion and passion behind the brand, board, and leadership, given that they've built it over the years. And this adds to the complexity of the deal, which is probably a little bit different than the for-profit world, and just something to be aware of and cognizant of as you move forward through your discussions and conversations and negotiations. So let's dive in. Obstacle number one is that there's going to be one brand. When you bring two organizations together, you're only going to have one surviving brand. Now, you may leverage and use the existing brand based on whether or not one has more equity in it than another. One might be more well-known, or one might be the larger entity, in which case it's determined to keep that as the surviving brand. Or both organizations might decide to create a new brand as a way of bringing the organizations and the teams together, giving them something to work on right after the close of the deal. Perhaps they implement a transition brand for the first year or two while they're developing that new brand name, that new logo, etc. Obstacle number two is that there's only going to be one board. When you combine two organizations, you're only going to have one surviving board. And you can do this a couple different ways. You can simply combine both boards. So if you have one organization with a board of 15 and another with a board of 15, you can combine and have a very large board of 30, which is very hard to manage, very complex, but perhaps there'll be attrition over the first year or two, which will allow you to bring those two organizations together without having to worry about cutting anybody's position. The second option is you could look at bringing on a percentage. So for example, if there is a large organization, let's say 100 million, that's acquiring a $50 million nonprofit organization, perhaps there's the decision to bring on 50% of their board member because it's in proportionate size to their budget. You can decide whatever metrics you want to use as part of the negotiation. Another thing to consider when bringing the boards together is the officer positions. If you're bringing like-size organizations together, sometimes you can stagger the officer positions, the chair from one organization, the vice chair from another, the treasurer from one organization, and the clerk from another. This gives you a little bit more equity in the deal, but if it's a large organization acquiring or merging with a small, there may be no change in the officer positions. So obstacle number three, which is probably the largest obstacle of them all, is that there's only going to be one leadership team. And this is why typically mergers and acquisitions happen frequently with organizations that have a retiring CEO or senior leader. Because at the end of the day, there is only going to be one CEO, one C-suite team. So one chief financial officer, one chief operating officer, one chief HR officer, etc. So for those that aren't going to be a part of the surviving organization, you want to provide that clarity up front. The clarity as to how long they may remain on in a transition role, and then supporting them in transitioning out of the organization onto newer and maybe even larger leadership roles. So these are the three major obstacles and barriers to mergers and acquisitions: brand, board, and leadership. They are very challenging and difficult conversations to have, but it's best to get those conversations done, completed, and agreed to up front so that they can be represented in a term sheet. And maybe that term sheet finds its way into the letter of intent or memorandum of understanding, which is how you would initiate the deal. But getting them done ahead of time is critical because you don't want to invest the time and the resources into the due diligence process, the legal process, etc., only to find out that these conversations would end the deal towards the closing. It's better to get the tough conversations done ahead of time, as painful as that may be. So again, we want to thank you for watching the big three obstacles to mergers and acquisitions. We hope you like, comment, subscribe, share, and even check out more of our videos on YouTube or visit our website at curtisstrategy.com. Thank you.